The forest had a silence that didn't comfort, it accused. Every creak of the trees, every ripple on the lake reminded Ethan that he'd come here to escape something he still carried inside. The tent was up, the fire crackled weakly, and yet the stillness pressed against him like a question he couldn't answer that he told himself he needed a break, time to think, time to breathe, but even as he unpacked his small cooler, his mind circled back to Ryan. The arguments had become dull and repetitive, forgotten messages, missed dinners, the kind of misunderstandings that accumulate quietly until love starts to sound like background noise. Ethan couldn't remember the last time Ryan had touched him without checking his phone afterward that he sat on a flat rock by the lake, sipping lukewarm coffee from a dented thermos. The water was smooth and glass-like, reflecting the fading orange of a restless sky. His phone buzzed once, he looked, hoping, and found nothing but a promotional email. He smiled bitterly and tossed it aside. No signal would be a blessing tonight. When the wind picked up, the scent of rain came with it. Ethan tightened the guy lines on his tent, listening to distant thunder roll through the valley. He'd always loved storms, the way they blurred everything, sound, shape, even thought. It was the only time he felt invisible in a good way. The first drops fell just as he zipped his jacket. Then came a voice, distant, rough-edged, calling out through the rain, "Hey! Is someone out there?" Ethan froze, startled. The flashlight beam cut through the mist. The voice came again, closer this time, uncertain. He stepped toward it, boots sinking into wet soil. A figure emerged from the trees, a man, soaked through, his backpack hanging from one strap. His hair clung to his forehead, his lips pale from the cold. "Sorry," the stranger said, panting. "Didn't mean to scare you. My tent, it collapsed in the storm. I've been trying to find shelter." Ethan blinked rain from his lashes. "You're alone out here?" The man nodded, pushing wet hair from his face. "Yeah. My name's Liam." There was hesitation in his voice, but something gentle too, a steadiness beneath the exhaustion. Ethan hesitated only a moment longer before gesturing toward his tent. "You can stay under my tarp for now. Fire's still going, if you don't mind sitting close." Liam managed a small smile. "I wouldn't mind that at all." They huddled beneath the narrow awning as rain clattered on the canvas above them. Ethan poured what was left of his coffee into a spare mug, sliding it over. Liam's hands trembled slightly as he took it. "Thanks," he said, blowing on the steam. "You're a lifesaver." Ethan shrugged. "Just luck. I've had worse nights out here." They spoke in fits and pauses, their voices nearly drowned by the storm. Liam was from the city. He mentioned a boyfriend, Cal, a photographer who was always away on shoots. The name came out lightly, but Ethan heard the strain under it. He knew that tone, it was the same one he used when talking about Ryan. When lightning split the sky, both men fell quiet. The silence that followed wasn't awkward, just dense, like the air was full of things neither dared say. Ethan studied Liam from the corner of his eye, the way he cradled the mug between both hands, the faint dimple that appeared when he frowned in thought. Something about him felt familiar, though they'd never met. Maybe loneliness recognized its own kind. Eventually, the thunder softened into distant murmurs. The rain slowed to a gentle hiss. Liam leaned back against his backpack, eyes half closed. "I didn't expect to meet anyone out here," he murmured. "Me neither," Ethan said. He wanted to add, "I came here to be alone," but the words felt dishonest now. They stayed like that for a long time, no stories, no questions, just the soft rhythm of water dripping from the tarp's edge. The fire sputtered, flaring once before sinking into glowing embers. When Liam finally spoke again, his voice was low, almost an echo. "Do you ever feel like you're waiting for something, and you don't even know what it is?" Ethan's throat tightened. He stared into the fire and said, "Every day." Liam nodded slowly, as if that answer made sense. He finished his coffee, setting the mug beside the ashes. "I should get some sleep," he said, pulling his damp jacket tighter. Ethan pointed to the spare tent beside his own. "It's dry inside. You can use it if you want." Liam hesitated, then smiled faintly. "You sure?" "Yeah," Ethan said. "No one else is coming." Their eyes met for a fraction too long, an acknowledgement of something that hadn't happened yet but already existed between them. Then Liam ducked inside the tent, the zipper closing softly behind him. Ethan sat alone beside the dying fire, listening to the last of the rain tapping against the tarp. In the distance, the lake whispered against the shore, calm and unbothered. He should have felt relief at the quiet, at the safety of another soul nearby. Instead, he felt something sharper, anticipation disguised as peace. When the wind carried the faint sound of Liam's breathing through the canvas, Ethan finally lay back on his sleeping mat, staring into the dark. Tomorrow, he thought, he'd leave early. That was the plan, but even then, he already knew he wouldn't. Morning came quietly, as if the forest itself was holding its breath. Thin threads of mist drifted above the lake, blurring the line between water and air. Ethan unzipped his tent to a world rinsed clean by rain. The fire pit was a mess of blackened wood and pale smoke, but beyond it, he saw Liam, crouched by the water's edge, washing his hands in the icy shallows. He moved differently in daylight, less cautious, more human. His hair was still damp, curling around his forehead. The early light caught the edge of his jaw, tracing a softness there that made Ethan look away before he could be caught staring. "Coffee?" Ethan called, forcing ease into his voice. Liam turned and smiled, that same tired, grateful expression from last night. "If it's strong." "It's terrible," Ethan said, "but it's hot." They laughed, and the sound felt heavier than it should have. The laughter wasn't about coffee, it was about being alive, about finding warmth in another person's presence when neither expected to. As they sat by the fire, steam rising between them, Liam glanced at Ethan's phone lying face down on the ground. "Signal yet?" Ethan shook his head. "Didn't check." "Good," Liam said softly. "Some silence should be protected." That sentence lingered longer than it should have. Ethan wanted to ask what he meant but didn't. Instead, he studied the way Liam's hands wrapped around the mug, steady now. He wondered what those hands had held before, a camera bag, a steering wheel, or maybe another man's face. They spent the late morning gathering firewood. The air carried the faint scent of pine resin and damp moss. Liam hummed a tune without words, something slow and nostalgic. Ethan joined in with quiet laughter. "You're terrible at that," he teased. "I know," Liam replied, smiling. "Cal hates when I sing." There it was again, Cal. The boyfriend. A name that felt like a stone tossed into still water. Ethan nodded. "Ryan doesn't like when I disappear for days. Says I avoid things I should face." "Do you?" "Sometimes." Ethan paused. "Do you?" Liam met his eyes, then looked away. "I think I face too much and say too little." For a while, they just walked, the sound of twigs breaking underfoot filling the space between words. When they returned, the afternoon sun was cutting through the trees, laying gold over the campsite. Liam stripped off his flannel shirt to hang it by the fire, revealing a trail of scars along his forearm, thin, pale reminders of old mistakes. Ethan noticed but didn't ask. Some stories were meant to remain unspoken. He looked away, focusing on the lake instead. "You ever swim in cold water?" he asked. Liam glanced up, smirking. "You're not serious." "It wakes you up," Ethan said. "Trust me." A few minutes later, laughter echoed through the clearing as they waded in, gasping at the shock of the cold. It wasn't about the swim, it was about forgetting for a moment who they were supposed to be. They splashed, teased, and for a heartbeat, everything felt simple. Back on shore, they sat wrapped in towels near the fire, steam rising from their shoulders. The air between them thickened again, heavy with something unnamed but mutual. Liam broke the silence first. "You ever wonder what it would feel like to start over?" Ethan glanced up. "I used to. Now I'm not sure I'd recognize myself if I did." Liam nodded slowly, gaze distant. "Maybe you don't have to start over. Maybe you just stop pretending everything's fine." The firelight flickered across their faces. Ethan's chest felt tight, not from cold, but from the gravity of what wasn't being said. Later, when the forest darkened and the air turned sharp again, they cooked what little food they had left. Conversation came easier, stories about college, about the city, about nothing. Every sentence filled another inch of the quiet that had once felt unbearable. Then, somewhere between a laugh and a sigh, it happened, the pause that lasted too long. Their eyes met across the fire, the world shrinking to the small circle of light between them. Ethan didn't move first. Neither did Liam. But the moment tipped on its own, slow and inevitable. When Liam's hand brushed Ethan's, neither pulled away. The touch was brief, innocent by appearance, but the current beneath it was unmistakable. The forest around them felt suddenly alive again, wind moving through branches, the low murmur of the lake, the soft crackle of wood giving way to flame. Liam whispered, "I don't usually." "I know," Ethan said. His voice barely existed. For a long moment, they sat there, firelight reflecting in their eyes, the space between them heavy with decisions unmade. Then Liam stood, stepping back into shadow. "We should sleep." Ethan nodded, though he couldn't find his voice. When Liam disappeared into his tent, the night closed in, quiet and vast. Ethan stared at the embers, his pulse refusing to settle. Somewhere inside, guilt began to bloom, but so did something else, something warmer and terrifyingly alive. He told himself it was just loneliness, just a moment. But deep down, he already knew better. Outside, the fire sighed one last time before surrendering to darkness. Dawn arrived quietly, creeping through the forest like a secret. Mist rolled low across the ground, curling between the tents in soft ribbons of silver. Ethan lay awake, staring at the faded nylon ceiling above him, listening to the faint rustle of movement from the next tent over. Every sound, every sigh, every zipper, felt weighted with memory. When he finally stepped outside, the air bit at his skin. Liam was already up, crouched beside his pack, fastening the torn strap they'd repaired the day before. His hair was damp again, but his expression had changed, no longer open, but distant, like someone halfway out the door. Ethan tried to sound casual. "You're heading out early." Liam glanced up, offering a small, practiced smile. "Forecast says another storm's coming. Thought I'd make some ground before it hits." Ethan nodded, though his chest felt hollow. "Right." They stood there for a moment, the silence between them stretching thin. The fire pit was cold now, reduced to gray ash. The air smelled of wet pine and something faintly metallic, like the taste of unsaid words. Liam's eyes softened. About last night, Ethan cut in quietly, you don't have to explain. Liam hesitated. I think I do. He exhaled slowly. I don't regret it. But I don't want it to be a story we tell ourselves later to make the loneliness sound romantic. The words landed gently but carried weight. Ethan looked down at his hands, the faint tremor there betraying more than he wanted to admit. It wasn't just loneliness, Ethan said finally. At least not for me. Liam didn't answer right away. He closed his pack, pulled the straps over his shoulders, and looked out toward the lake. The morning light reflected off the surface in fractured silver, dazzling and cold. I know, Liam said softly. That's why I should go. Ethan wanted to argue, to say something that would hold him there, even for an hour more. But he couldn't. The moment was already fading, and both of them knew it. Instead, Ethan reached out, touching Liam's arm lightly. Be safe out there. Liam nodded. You too. He turned, walking down the narrow trail that led into the trees. The sound of his footsteps grew faint, then disappeared entirely, swallowed by the forest. Ethan stood for a long time, staring at the path where Liam had vanished. The campsite felt unfamiliar now, emptier than before Liam had arrived. He kicked at the ashes, stirred the remnants of their fire until gray dust rose and vanished into the breeze. Back in his tent, his phone vibrated. The screen lit with a message, Ryan, I miss you. Can we talk? Ethan stared at the words, his thumb hovering above the keyboard. There was no anger in him, no guilt sharp enough to bleed. Just a quiet ache, the kind that lives beneath honesty. He typed, yeah. I'll be home soon. Then he deleted it. Outside, the lake shimmered faintly under the morning sun. The air had warmed just enough to make the mist lift, revealing the far shore in slow, deliberate detail. He walked down to the water's edge, crouching where Liam had washed his hands the morning before. The ground still bore the imprint of his boots. Ethan traced one with his finger, the soil damp and cool. It happened, he thought. It mattered. That was enough. By noon, he'd packed his gear and loaded the car. The drive back wound through miles of pines and winding asphalt. The forest blurred into a watercolor of greens and gray, fading behind him like a dream he wasn't sure he wanted to wake from. At a small gas station halfway home, Ethan stopped for coffee. A man at the counter wore a jacket like Liam's, dark blue, frayed at the collar. For an instant, Ethan's heart jumped. Then the man turned, and it wasn't him. He smiled faintly at his own foolishness. The world was full of people who looked almost like the ones we lose. Back on the road, his reflection in the window caught him off guard, tired eyes, windblown hair, a mouth caught between a frown and something close to peace. By the time he reached the city, dusk had settled over the skyline. The apartment lights looked distant, muted behind drawn curtains. Ryan was waiting on the porch, hands shoved into his pockets. Ethan parked, sat for a moment with the engine ticking softly, and watched him. He remembered every fight, every apology, every silence they'd mistaken for forgiveness. When he finally stepped out, Ryan met him halfway. The hug was brief but real. No words, no questions, just a fragile understanding that some distances can't be measured in miles. As they stood there, Ethan's narration would come soft and steady, like the closing line of a memory. Out there, in the rain, I met a stranger. He didn't fix me. He didn't ruin me either. But for one night, he reminded me that love doesn't always stay where it's supposed to. And maybe, that's the part we're meant to live with. The scene fades to quiet, only the hum of the city, the low rustle of wind, and the faint sound of a heartbeat steadying itself again. A week had passed since the forest, but the quiet hadn't left Ethan. It followed him into every room, into the clatter of the kitchen, the hum of the refrigerator, the distant sound of traffic that usually anchored him to routine. Now, it just sounded like another kind of wilderness. Ryan moved through their apartment like someone trying not to wake a sleeping animal. He made coffee in silence, left post-it notes instead of speaking. The two of them had mastered coexistence without connection, a choreography of avoidance that had become almost comforting. Ethan sat by the window most mornings, staring at the city skyline. It looked vast but empty, each building reflecting the light of lives he didn't belong to. His phone lay on the table, screen dark. No new messages. He didn't expect any. From Liam or anyone else. The memory of that night in the forest returned in fragments, the glow of firelight, the brush of Liam's hand, the soft weight of unspoken understanding. He tried to forget it, but forgetting something that had felt honest was impossible. Ryan broke the silence one evening while drying a plate. You've been somewhere else lately, he said quietly. Even after coming home. Ethan kept his eyes on the window. Maybe I never really left. Ryan sighed, setting the plate down. I know things haven't been good between us. But I've been trying, Ethan. I'm still trying. The words should have softened him, but they didn't. They felt like lines rehearsed too often. Ethan turned to face him, noticing the faint dark circles under Ryan's eyes. He looked smaller somehow, as if the arguments had carved him hollow. I know you are, Ethan said. But trying isn't the same as wanting. Ryan flinched. So you don't want this anymore? Ethan didn't answer right away. He thought of the lake, the quiet pulse of rain against canvas, the sound of Liam's voice asking if he ever wished to start over. The truth was too complicated for a yes or no. I don't know what I want, he admitted. I just know I can't keep pretending I'm happy. The silence that followed was sharp. Ryan nodded slowly, his jaw tightening. Then maybe we both need space. It wasn't a breakup, not yet, but it was something close. A line drawn softly enough to be erased later, if either of them changed their mind. That night, Ethan couldn't sleep. The city lights flickered through the blinds, painting thin lines across the ceiling. He imagined Liam somewhere under a different sky, maybe with Cal, maybe alone, maybe pretending to. He reached for his journal, a habit he hadn't touched in years. The pen hovered over the page before words began to form on their own. He came out of the rain like a question. And I answered it, even though I shouldn't have. He stopped writing, staring at the sentence. It wasn't guilt that filled him, it was clarity. For years, he'd been living inside silence, mistaking comfort for love. Liam hadn't been a mistake. He'd been a reminder that something inside him still wanted to feel alive. The next morning, Ryan had already left for work. A note sat by the coffee pot, "We'll figure it out. Don't give up on us yet." Ethan read it twice, then folded it carefully and tucked it into his pocket. He packed a small bag, nothing dramatic, just a few essentials, and left the apartment without deciding where to go. He ended up by the water, at the same lake that bordered the edge of the city park. It wasn't the same as the forest, but the air still smelled faintly of pine after rain. He sat on a bench, watching the ripples distort the reflection of the skyline. For the first time in days, he took a deep breath. The ache was still there, but it had softened into something bearable. Maybe this was what healing looked like, not erasing what happened, but learning how to carry it without letting it crush him. He pulled his phone from his pocket and scrolled through old photos. There was one from the trip, a blurry image of the lake taken at dawn. No Liam in it, no proof he'd even been real. But Ethan remembered the sound of his laugh, the warmth that still lingered in memory. That was enough. He whispered, almost to himself, "Thank you." As the wind picked up, scattering a few leaves across the water, Ethan stood. The day was gray but open, waiting. He didn't know where he was heading, only that he would keep walking until the weight felt lighter. Behind him, the lake rippled once more, catching the faint glint of sunlight through the clouds, fleeting but certain.